And we are back. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, in the heart of the city we love. CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, our apolitical, all billionaire baseball boys club crony capitalist Fenway Wet Dream apolitical Twitter feed at Pawtucket is Home, where we get to gin everything up again. Oy, with round 35 of the ongoing episodes of the soap opera we lovingly ripped off from Cal Burnett as the stomach turns, otherwise known as the Pawtucket Red Sox attempt to build a stadium. By the way, for the record, I had the opportunity last night to meet Stephen Pryor, the head of your Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, when we found ourselves, somewhat ironically, and my guests will appreciate the humor of this, went to a fabulous venue for a fundraiser / holiday party / Bill Hunt candidacy announcement, and that was Break Time Bowling, which is in the Hope Artiste Mills on Main Street in the Bucket, Pawtucket. Great spot. The food was great. The service here is fantastic. The bowling is it's just great stuff. It's the heart of a milk complex. If you support small business and you want to believe in the single strike theory, go to Hope Artiste Village. Dozens of great local businesses in there, and of course, Break Time Bowling. Now imagine, if you will, a moderately sized venue, one that could support a couple hundred people, with 6 bowling lanes. A nice long bar, old school, beers on draft, great pizza. So imagine this, if you will. The venue was booked for the night for private parties, and they'll host 2 private organizations at one time. One, of course, was your Libertarian Party of the great state of Rhode Island. Who was the other group? Who could have guessed? The Commerce Corporation of Rhode Island. Folks who are longtime listeners will find the deep irony and humor of that astonishing. Sort of like, I don't know, sitting at a wedding, the 2 ex-mother-in-laws at one table after a divorce. We held the ground. We held the high ground. We chanted to our big government friends, the people who brought you 38 studios, the people, in fact, who brought you a generation, a litany of political, economic failure, a big government. We put a little holiday chant together for them. We were chanting end corporate welfare. Now this is in a space, maybe 1,000 square feet. We chanted that we need to end 38 Stadium. I managed to reach out and greet a number of members of the Commerce Corporation, including Mr. Pryor. And you can imagine how that went. But you know, the one thing I'll promise, I will never say on the air what I won't say to you in person. And I don't care if you're the governor, if you're the president. I don't care. And I'm not here to make you feel better, because the government of Rhode Island, a generational failure, supports a commerce corporation that has left zombie deals littered across the landscape of the state. This government has failed its young people with its failing schools. It's failed businesses with its confiscatory tax structure. On every single level, folks who run businesses here, even at a marginal level, are heroes, because they do so despite the very best efforts of the state of Rhode Island and the Commerce Corporation to cannibalize whatever opportunities you create, what other wealth you may somehow create, despite their very best efforts. So folks, if you know somebody who works for the Commerce Corporation, that guy last night, he meant every single damn word of what he said. And I'll repeat it to him again. So, but enough of that. Somehow, my guest who's about to join me has never been on the show before. And it's someone who I have a profound level of admiration for on a couple levels. Kind of a Renaissance guy. Legal environments, technical environments, nothing stands in his way. A community activist. Someone who, despite operating at the highest levels of the Libertarian Party nationally, manages to find time for every single cause that he can squeeze into his day. I personally will never forget the time he drove down with literature, with equipment, to our first entree, if you will, 2 years ago into the Pride Parade here in Providence, helped man the booth, just helped. And does all the hard work at every single event. There's no ego involved. It's simply continued hard work for a cause that he believes in to his core. He's got his own radio show on WRKO. He's going to tell us a little bit about that tonight. He is also, in addition to being a party activist, he is also a candidate. And as I've said before, I hold people who run for office in the highest esteem. They are the true patriots of America, particularly when they run for the type of offices we're going to talk about, where, again, real work is involved. You'll never have 100 PR flags following you, but you will simply execute the will of the people in very challenging times. That person is none other than Dan Fishman. He's with the Massachusetts Libertarian Party. He's a candidate for the state auditor against an entrenched cronyist incumbent. See, I could say all the mean things. He's too nice of a guy.
I appreciate it.
All right, but he's joining us live for the first time on the coalition. Dan, it's great to finally have you on the show.
And what a pleasure to be on, Pat. And you know, that introduction, right? My mother doesn't say things about me that nice, and she's pretty proud of me. So thank you very much. You know what? It's one of those things that it doesn't feel like activism, because it feels like we're making a difference, and it feels like it's our calling. You know, those of us who have the ability to speak out, now is our moment. This is the libertarian moment. Jim Bouchard, who ran for Congress in Maine, said, "I didn't become a libertarian, I discovered I was one." That discovery happens with people like you and me talking about the message. So thank you for having a radio show. Thank you for having me on.
So tell us now, one of the issues here in Rhode Island, I mean, is if there is a failed city-state in America, a textbook case of failed collectivism driven by cronyism, for years, I think going forward, the Harvard Business School will actually look to Rhode Island for that. In one of the biggest challenges that we have as a state is the absence of any sort of, at least somewhat independent, auditor / inspector general / fill in the blanks. You are running for state auditor of Massachusetts. We're going to distribute this video around the Commonwealth. But tell us a little bit about the job, but also tell us about what your challenges are in fighting the incumbent, and why it's such a critical part of democracy to have a position like this.
So one of the things that's happened recently over the past few years is government has become the last vestige of the crony capitalists. They use the power of government to reward business favors, to spend money to benefit the political donors. And of course, that's not what our government is meant for. And specifically, John Adams, when he wrote the Massachusetts State Constitution, recognized that there was a potential issue there. And in full disclosure, the Massachusetts State Constitution is actually the oldest continually used constitution. It predates the American Constitution, which it was the model for. And in that Constitution, John Adams wrote that there should be an auditor. And specifically, he wrote that the auditor will have the power to require every state agency to report its accounting. So, for me, that seems like a wonderful opportunity to provide transparency in government. For the current auditor, it seems like a way to use the power of government to grind a political axe. I'll point out something that happened today. The auditor issued a report saying that DCF and, Massachusetts Department of Children and Families is notorious for all sorts of terrible problems. We had abusive parents who had a baby go missing, even though DCF was supposed to be watching out. The baby turned up dead 6 months later. They kidnapped a child from Connecticut. You may remember Justina Pelletier. All these problems that DCF has had. Today, the current auditor announced that, we audited the DCF, and they're still bad, and we're blaming it on the governor. It's not that DCF is bad, that it's anybody's fault. She has a political axe to grind. Charlie Baker seems inassailable, and so she's using her office, and the currently elected auditor is a Democrat. She's using it to attack a Republican in office, which is crazy. And then she went on to say, so DCF has this big problem. It's huge. It's enormous. It's a terrible problem. but we're not going to audit them again for another year. She has the power to continually audit them. If it's really that big of a problem, I would be auditing them every week.
Right.
Another thing that is critical is that the time has passed for non-technical solutions to problems that technologies can solve. So in my day job, I'm a software engineer. I've worked around the block. You and I are old enough to remember the Palm Pilot. I worked for Palm back in the day. Worked for Mass General. I currently work for a company that writes special education software. My goal, and this is how radical I am as a politician, I will quote Democrats when the time is right. I'm going to quote Louis Brandeis, who said, "Sunlight is the best disinfectant." Mm-hmm. I'm running on a very simple platform as auditor. All the state's books, online, all the time. Specifically, John Adams wrote to me in the Constitution, and he said, this is what the auditor is supposed to do. The technology is there, so that's what I'm going to do.
Excellent. What, tell me about some of the issues. Now, you talk about DCF, and here in Rhode Island, we have similar problems. We're talking fundamental human tragedies here.
Yeah.
The most defenseless amongst us, the most vulnerable.
The ones that we would want government to step up and lead, and yet, no.
And it's not for the money, because there's tremendous amounts of money being spent. It's not for the size of the manpower, it's how manpower is appropriated. Rhode Island, and I feel like Massachusetts, while maybe not as bad, is inundated with six-figure, mid-level management types that, quite frankly, could exist nowhere else but government. Here in Rhode Island, one of our biggest challenges is this economic development corporation that we have. You heard me intoning about. We currently find ourselves in a situation with the Pawtucket Red Sox Baseball Club where they expect us to extend all sorts of money, but they don't want to fully open their books. Now, as libertarians, we don't believe any business should open their books, but the trouble is, you get into bed with the government, then your board of directors are the taxpayers. So, sorry, Sparky, man up, open the books. So, we don't have a state auditor per se. We have one that, kind of a weak one that's appointed by the legislature, so they're wholly dependent on the legislature. You've got economic development that takes place in Massachusetts. What type of purview does the state auditor have on that or not? Or what role do you think the state auditor should play if, in fact, we continue to allow state agencies to act as investment bankers?
So one of the things that I talk about all the time is that we recognize that our American political process has become broken. And it's become broken because of tribalism. Because Republicans are getting ready to vote for an accused pedophile, a man who said that homosexuality should be punishable by death. And they're getting ready to elect him senator in Alabama.
But by the way, did you see today's latest bon mot from the good, I call him Senator-elect because I think he's going to win, the notion that somehow slavery held families together, or...
Yeah. No, I mean, you know what, I appreciate the fact that if your strategy is idiocy, he is doubling down on it right now. That's good. But, so Republicans, they don't care because it's their tribe. That's their tribe.
Right.
Democrats, same thing, right? You could run, case in point, Charlie Baker is probably the most universally loved governor across voting paths. And yet Democrats will go out of their way to attack him for no reason other than pure political gain. He could walk on water. There's the classic joke that if you can't please people, they're going to if you're not of their tribe. Sort of losing my way here. If you're not of their tribe, then they're going to be opposed to you.
Right.
So what I'm trying to offer to the people, the voters of Massachusetts, is to elect somebody in the one position that you don't want to have somebody who's in the tribe. The motto of our campaign, the slogan is, the referee shouldn't be wearing the jersey of one of the two teams.
Right.
And that makes complete sense. More than that, again, going back to John Adams, he wrote that into the Constitution. He said that, the office of the auditor is meant to be independent, and therefore we will put the selection of the auditor in the hands of the electorate. Instead of having an appointed auditor, or instead of having an auditor, for life, every 4 years, Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, is supposed to elect a new auditor. What can the auditor do about business deals? So the auditor only has one power, the power to expose the truth. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Mm-hmm.
When the government makes deals, the auditor will know where all the money goes, and the auditor has the right to request a complete accounting of all the money that's spent and to make that public. Mm-hmm. And that's bigger than just, the sweetheart deal that we just made to bring GE downtown. Mm-hmm. That's going to be bigger than the deal that we're getting ready to make to bring Amazon to Suffolk Downs. It also includes when that's government giving away our money. Well, let's talk about when government takes our money. As an auditor, my one thing that I want to make sure of is that every aspect of civil asset forfeiture, when the government is seizing people's money and property, I want a complete accounting of that. Because I don't think we know the full picture right now.
Right.
Even though we could, the auditor has a tremendous amount of power to not do anything but expose everything. And isn't that the one position where we would want to elect somebody who is neither a Republican nor a Democrat? Somebody with no axe to grind, mm-hmm. but a reputation for being fiscally rigorous.
Right. No, absolutely, because what's happened in the rest of the executive branches, executive offices, if you will, typically in most states you've got a governor, lieutenant governor, general treasurer, secretary of state, attorneys general, and then you've got that professionalized tier, including some form of auditor. Now, there was a time when the state's attorney general was fiercely independent of any political influence whatsoever. In fact, very often in so many states, the state's attorney general's office as an elective office was considered a dead end because one who did the job well so thoroughly infuriated his own party and the other party that they had no chance of winning another election. And it was a measure of how well they did the job. What's always been fascinating to me, for example, though, however, in Massachusetts, you've got this guy Galvin who seems to have pictures on everybody because he's been, I think, the state's Secretary of State since John Adams.
So, interestingly enough, he was elected Secretary of State the same time that Bill Weld was elected governor for his first term in Massachusetts. And interestingly enough, when he was elected Secretary of State, the husband of our current chair, Chris Crawford, Peter Everett is his name, ran against him for state senate. Galvin's particularly on my bad list because at the Democratic National Convention, he said last election cycle, right when Hillary was being anointed as a candidate, he said, voting for a third-party candidate is throwing away your vote. Now, if he believes that, that's one thing. But as the highest election official in the state of Massachusetts, that is completely inappropriate for him to be saying.
Exactly.
I have high hopes that we're going to be running somebody against him because redistricting is also coming up. And the Secretary of State has a tremendous amount of influence in that.
Right.
Also, to get on the ballot in Massachusetts, and so this is where I shamelessly plug my campaign, we are going to need to get, it was required 5,000 signatures to get on the ballot in Massachusetts. We think that because we are a major party and we're only allowed to gather from libertarians and independents, we cannot get signatures from Republicans or Democrats. We believe that our validity rate is probably going to run around 60%. So we're going to have to gather at least 9,000 signatures. Mm-hmm. In order to do that, we are going to need money. And so here's my shameless plea to your listeners. Please go to www.auditmassachusetts.com. Look at my where I stand, my positions. Think about what it means, how it changes the government, how it changes our actual national political conversation. Mm-hmm. If we elect an independent auditor to office, it changes the balance, it changes the tribalism, and it makes other people realize there's another way out there. Politics is not right or left. Republicans and Democrats will tell you that politics is right and left, and that to the right are the Republicans, and beyond that is corporations running everything. And to the left are the Democrats, and beyond that is the state running everything. But libertarians know that politics is three-dimensional. It's not a number line.
Mm-hmm.
That third dimension, that third direction, that's up. That's the direction of personal liberty. And all we have to do to achieve personal liberty is to be willing to stand up. Martin Luther King said, "A man can't ride your back unless it's bent." And he said that while he was in jail in Birmingham. If we can just get people to stand up, realize that it's possible, we can win. We can achieve the libertarian moment. Does it start with my campaign? Does it start somewhere else? I don't know. But if people can find their way to send me $10, $10 buys a week-long Facebook ad. $20 buys a short spot via Twitter, a prominent placement. Money goes a long ways this day, and early money counts twice.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize for shilling.
No, listen, we have a program here on the coalition called Libertarian Fabulous. Dan, you are the epitome of Libertarian Fabulous, and we will circulate this interview amongst the Libertarian pages of which we're all so fond of, and we all spend so much time either loving or getting pilloried by them. But ultimately, libertarians across the nation, there's a special election going on in Florida right now that we'll talk about in the future.
Boxall, wonderful candidate.
Wonderful candidate who is gaining a lot of traction and gaining a lot of media attention, being included as a peer in media debates. We saw the Mark Wicks phenomenon in Montana. We've seen libertarians in New Hampshire. We've seen libertarians across this country begin, as we love to say, to assume the roles of highest power so that they, in fact, can leave everyone alone. But it's critical that we reach across, whether it's Mr. Bowen in Utah, and across the country, and a few dollars from the millions of people who supported Gary Johnson and Bill Weld for the presidency and vice presidency of the United States just a year ago. All right, a few dollars for each of them changes the world. Literally changes the equation, changes the argument, because libertarians nationally, as it's happening here locally in Rhode Island, we are no longer responding to the duopoly. We are framing the argument, we are framing the conversation, and as I love to say, we are asking the questions that regular folks who have been victims of this duopoly for generations didn't even know they had to answer yet. And I
like to say, common sense requires common people.
Right.
And common people are waking up to the idea that we are actually all common people together. We have a lot in common. What we have in common is our desire for liberty.
Right. And I want to always remind people that libertarians, more so than any other political movement in this country, respect the rights of the ultimate minority, and that ultimate minority is, in fact, the individual. And in doing so, has a profound respect for the lifestyle choices, the decisions people make for their own personal lives, their own self-determination, their own self-definition, in a way that no other political movement does, and we swear an oath to it. So it's not just a movement, it's not just a philosophy, it's a political organization that is intent on leveling the playing field so that Americans, as well as around the world, can seek freedom, liberty, prosperity through the free exchange of ideas, people, and commerce. It's an astonishingly simple proposition. And when you're a libertarian, here we ran 3 great General Assembly candidates last time, and the takeaway from folks was, wow, I asked Daryl, Billy, Annalee, Tony, I asked them a question, and they answered it. And because when you have a philosophy and a belief system that you stick to, answers are very simple, aren't they?
Yep. And Larry Sharp puts it really well. He says, we are libertarians, and there is a libertarianism. Democrats don't have a democratism. Republicans don't have a republicanism, because fundamentally, they're not based on any particular philosophy. The 2 big parties at this point in time have become corporations. And in fact, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are incorporated. They're corporations that are selling elections. They have studied their craft like a good corporation should. They know how to cut costs. They know how to produce efficiently. They know how to win elections. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to win those elections. I think about, filibuster, right? The Republicans repealed the filibuster this year, mostly, right? In 2013, they were completely against repealing the filibuster when the Democrats turned it down. They just flipped sides 4 years later. Syria, right? 2017, Republicans are talking about putting troops into Syria. 2013, Donald Trump is tweeting, it would be a terrible mistake for the United States to get involved in any way in Syria. They're corporations, and they sell elections, and they have no principles. That's
Right.
why the only principled party is the one that has an ism behind it,
Right.
libertarianism and the Libertarian Party.
The duopoly, the Republicans and the Democrats, let me put it very simply, do not seek votes, they seek market share.
Yep.
That's all you need to know. Dan, the right now, the beauty of this election and what's so great about having you in it is your ability to, again, accessibility is a watchword here in the Libertarian Movement at the Coalition, because you make these ideas so accessible. How important and how exciting is it now to have platforms across the Commonwealth and across places like Rhode Island where you can, evoke clear, cogent libertarian principles and apply them to direct everyday lives?
Yeah, it's the thing about it is that we've had some issues that people understand, right? I mean, I think of all the issues that the Libertarian Party was way out in front of society on, right? Marriage equality, Libertarian Party was miles ahead of the rest of the country. Cannabis, we were miles ahead of the rest of the country. Police brutality, we were miles ahead of the rest of the country. These are all issues that now we talk to people about, saying, we were advocating for these long before anybody else was, and like, that's important to me. I understand now that what you were talking about when you were talking about liberty, when I thought, there's these crazy guys talking about dope, actually, they were talking about liberty, and cannabis was one part of that issue. They were talking about liberty, and same-sex marriage was one part of that issue. Because, I say this all the time, libertarians don't actually care about same-sex marriage. We care about everybody's right to do their own thing. That's one manifestation of it. Gambling. Gambling is something that we are way out in front of right now. It is ridiculous that the state has such a control over gambling.
Oh my God, yeah.
That they're giving away, first of all, the lottery, right, is ridiculous. Then the licensing of casinos is ridiculous. And then the idea that they bust up my March Madness game and they say it's illegal to play March Madness for money in the state of Massachusetts and throughout the United States, that's ridiculous. That we can't put a bet on the Patriots in the Super Bowl this year, knock on wood, that we can't express ourselves, that we can't gamble, right? What business is of the government to control?
Exactly. To us, ultimately, there's the T word, trust.
Yeah.
We trust the individual. We trust the voters. We trust citizens to make decisions that are well-informed, to make them in their own best behalf, and at the same time, we trust them to absorb the implications and consequences if those decisions don't exactly have a Hollywood ending. We trust the individual. And when you look at issues like gambling, I recently, there's a sports talk radio show here in Rhode Island, talk kind of our local take on the guys at EEI or the Score. And, they were talking about book gambling and all the different laws and court cases that are going on. So I called in and, kind of well known to them. The host, great guy named Andy Grash, he and I have done battle. Go to fightthestadium.com, folks, by the way, you'll see Andy and I in a heated debate. But I said to Andy, how about we do this with sportsbook betting? Make it legal for everyone. It's a consensual business transaction that takes place between two adults. It's really that simple.
Yeah.
You'll eliminate the gangsterism aspect. You'll eliminate, what happens if there's a problem? We have courts. One of the few parts of government that libertarians approve of is, in fact, a court system in a government which seeks to adjudicate property rights contracts. You gamble on something you can't pay up. Yeah. Pretty simple stuff. So
I agree. It is the legitimate purpose of government to arbitrate our disputes that we cannot resolve ourselves. That is the one thing that government is specifically for, because we know that in a situation where we're going to have forms of disputes, there has to be, at some point in time, an arbiter. Ideally, we could pick those arbiters ourselves, and really that's what government is supposed to be. It's supposed to be that we think about the fact that the conflicts that we have shouldn't be my friend, shouldn't be your friend arbitering. We should have a vote about who actually is going to be the arbiter. And that's the original purpose of government, not to tell us that, we have to pay tax on cigarettes, not to tell us that, we have to register our car once a year, or our gun, or anything like that. That's not what government's for. Government's meant to be an assistant to us, to help our lives be livable. You know, we have a large civilization. There's what's the Providence is 600,000 people.
The whole state's just under 1 million, believe it or not. We managed to drive out a lot of people in this state.
Well, but so the thing about it is that Providence is not big. To fit that many people in that space, you have to have some sort of agreement between people. And most of it is common sense, right? People agree this is what we have to do to live together, and there's all sorts of benefits of living together. We don't need government to tell us how to help each other out. But in those few cases where I think, well, you know what, I should have the liberty to do this, and somebody else thinks, no, you know, that's intruding on my liberty, that's the one thing that we need government for.
Yeah, no, it should be remarkably straightforward, but we have allowed groups of interest, coalitions to form, in certain ways, much like the foreign powers that Washington invade against. The notion that a two-party system is at all successful at this point and needs to adhere to because of the much hated words, that's the way it's done.
Right.
Do we continue to march down that trail of failure, the trail of tears?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Now, you know, if you can give us a snapshot too now for the libertarians listening, what you've got your election. Are you folks? Have you announced other candidacies yet? Are you working on them? Where? Give us a kind of a taste of what's happening in Liberty, Massachusetts.
Well, in Liberty, Massachusetts, we have so our petition papers come out February 14th. So to be fair, we can say that we have people on the ballot, but we really only have people who want to go and gather signatures, and then they all have to be in by the end of May. So we have a 10-week period in which people can go out and gather signatures. We have at least one federal candidate running for Congress. Sam Rachapi will be running in MA6, which is northeastern Massachusetts, the district that I ran for Congress in 2012. And I don't know that there's going to be a Republican. Oh, you know what? There is a Republican running. I take it back. But I think it's a place in which libertarians are very well received. I did very well there in 2012. I think if people are ready to hear the message again, Sam's a good candidate in that respect. We are trying to run as many candidates as we can for state senate. The Republicans, there's 82 seats for state senate. The Republicans only ran about 20 candidates last cycle. We hope that we can do better than that. In particular, we're looking for places where the Republicans aren't running, because we don't think an American-style democracy is an election where only one candidate runs. Let's at least run two candidates on the ballot. So we're going to push hard for that. The signature requirement for state senate is 300, and as I said before, now that we're a major party, that actually becomes much harder to get because we can only gather from libertarians and independents. The other thing about it, though, is that that's actually good prep work for 2 years from now. Because an example of the imposition that the state puts upon us is now that we're a major party, and assuming we retain our major party status to the next election, the state committee will no longer be voted upon by libertarians. The state committee will be voted upon at the primary at the next election. So, realistically speaking, you know, I could be voted out of office. Honestly, sometimes I think, wow, wouldn't that be nice? So we want people to practice running in the state senate districts, because the state senate district is exactly the same district where you elect your state committee men and women that make up the state committee. We actually have a pending lawsuit. Well, we're in the process of preparing a lawsuit against the state, because the state also requires the parties to elect one state man and one state woman to the committee from each senate district. To me, that sounds like a quota. The fact that you can't elect two men or two women from the same district, that seems unconstitutional to me, especially in Massachusetts. It's ridiculous that we would have that. So it's nice that they're giving us the opportunity to sue the state over that. It'll be an interesting case. In terms of other candidates that are running, I don't know that we're going to have a gubernatorial candidate. And again, another way that the Democrats, and this I can't blame I will blame the Republicans for a lot of stuff, but I can't blame them for this. The Democrats, because they've owned the state for so long, they put in some crazy signature requirements. So if you are not a major party, if we were running as the Liberty Party, we could actually gather signatures for all the candidates on the same sheet of paper: governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, and auditor. But because we're not a major party, every candidate has to gather independently. So I have to gather 5,000 signatures as an auditor. Whoever wants to run for governor has to gather 10,000 signatures by themselves, aside from that. What that does, because essentially to gather that many signatures, you have to pay for some petitioners. Signatures usually cost, depending on who's doing it and how good they are, about $3 to $4 a signature.
Right.
So that means that for somebody to get on ballot, let's say volunteers can gather 2,000 signatures for you, the governor still is going to have to gather 13,000 more signatures, which, you know, at least, if we say it's $4 a signature, and that's with a large margin of error, that's over $40,000. That's a major investment to run for governor. At least for auditor, if we only need 5,000 signatures, figure a 50% margin of error. We want to get 7,500. We really want to get 9,000. So if we can get $4 for that, that's going to be $36,000 to gather them, to pay to gather them all. Hopefully, we think volunteers can gather half, but we're still going to be out 4,000 signatures, which is going to be at $4 a signature, $16,000. That's a lot of money for the Libertarian Party in Massachusetts.
Well, it's a lot of money to everybody, and it's really a barrier to democracy. It's just, and so when you've got an entrenched Democratic Party that manages to derive succor, if you will, from their own personal interests, then you've got, you know, they're entrenched. They don't have to worry about going out and raising that kind of money. So it's disgusting that someone would. And they listen. They're never going to open up the welcome mat for us. If folks
what's funny is they proposed a bill last year. It didn't make it to the floor, but they proposed it that would ban paid petition gatherers. So, you know, there's no way a third-party candidate would ever get on the ballot and infringe upon their election again if we couldn't pay people to help us gather signatures. We just don't have that many people.
Right. You know, and so it just proves the big lie of our alleged democracy, because again, you've got these two corporations dying for market share, who are looking to maintain an exclusivity over essentially the corporatized ownership of our nation. And it's, folks, if folks are looking for a simple act of civil disobedience where they can literally extend that much vaunted middle finger to the establishment, it's just to support a libertarian candidate.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it costs nothing. You should donate to your local Libertarian Party, but it costs nothing to do. And if, you know, those loathed words, drain the swamp, the swamp is filled with creatures, both D's and R's. And who are not, you know, we have an old saying here, or someone else came up with it, it's a little cutesy, but, you know, public service is supposed to be about people who want to help lives, not get one. And a fundamental aspect of the libertarian movement is both voluntarism and volunteering. If you believe as we do in minimal government and going back to a citizenry that is engaged in the day-to-day process of government, that means you have to actually walk that walk, and libertarians by and large do. And at the same time, if you want to remind government, the entrenched duopoly, of the voluntary nature of government, what do I mean by that? It's the notion that I, as a free person, born, simply by being born, volunteer to be governed.
Yeah.
A privilege that I extend to them, not them to me, that I maintain the right to withdraw at any one time. If you would like to remind government of that, there is no better exercise in democracy than simply voting for a libertarian. It changes everything, doesn't it? Yep.
I mean, I gave a talk yesterday. I was down at Berkeley Berkeley College of Music, and I had to give this talk by saying, you know, the libertarian endgame is the end of politics, because what we want to do is we want to reduce the power of politics to the point that nobody would really want to be a politician anymore. It would be a burden rather than a way to enrich yourself. John Dillinger, the famous bank robber, was asked why he robbed banks, and he said because that's where the money is. Politicians are running for office for the same reason. That's where the money is. That's where the power is. That's why they're spending millions of dollars on elections that really are just being wasted. If we want to get the money out of politics, get the money out of government. It's a very simple proposition, and electing a libertarian does that.
Excellent. Okay, give us again, how can folks get in touch with Dan Fishman? Give us the sites, loud and clear.
I'm going to give you two things. First, www.auditmassachusetts.com. That's my site. I'm running for auditor. Early money counts twice. Make a donation. Read about my endorsements from Bill Weld. Another major endorsement dropping next week. And then if I could give a quick plug for my radio show.
Absolutely.
www.libertyontheair. I think that'll be visible to everybody.
Yep.
Dan Fishman, Liberty on the Air. WRKO AM 680, The Talk of Boston. 11 p.m. Saturday nights. 617-266-6868. Feel free to call in when you available and you want to talk to Liberty.
Absolutely.
It's the Liberty show in New England, I think.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Dan Fishman, he is a Renaissance guy, candidate supreme for the position of auditor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He's a civic activist, a civil libertarian, a true big L, small L libertarian. He is, as we define it, Libertarian Fabulous, and accessible in so many ways. Dan, as a movement, we're fortunate to have you with us. And you know, there's one of our favorite spots to coalesce between the Massachusetts and Rhode Island Libertarian Movement. There's a Stop and Shop in North Attleboro, where, as a corporation, they are very friendly to having petitions. I expect that we'll be spending quality time in the new year at a certain North Attleboro Stop and Shop on Washington Street, where Rhode Island Libertarians would be proud to stand alongside their Commonwealth of Massachusetts brothers and sisters to help you in that cause. So I make that invitation to you now, and let's get going, buddy.
Thank you very much, Pat, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, this will be the first of many. So, folks, Dan Fishman, Massachusetts Libertarian, a mover and shaker in the national liberty movement, and someone who, as we love to say in the coalition hashtag, clearly takes it very, very personally. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break right now. I've got a special guest waiting in the wings. Brian Bishop is going to be joining us. Folks, we are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage, porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcasting Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The Naked City, the city of 1,000 stories. We've told a few more. We've got a great one coming right up. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and CoalitionRadio.us, whereas when the host can manage to squeeze in time, upload all sorts of video. These and future performances will be memorialized in perpetuity at our YouTube link at CoalitionRadio.us. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back.